Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the VGN Podcast. For those of you who don't know who VGN are, we are the video game nerds. We are here to discuss all sorts of video game-related content and business within the industry. We do reviews, news, podcasts, which can all be found through our recently updated website, VGNonline.co.uk. That's VGNonline.co.uk. Any content that we produce will be shot straight up there. And as well as all the news, reviews, podcasts, and other video content that we're producing, we are happy to announce that the VGN Online store will be up and running imminently, maybe even by the time that you've finished listening to this podcast. On the VGN store, we've got a very small amount of bespoke merchandise, which is made by our lead creative designer, Grant Killoran, who's just recently put up a review on Rage, a first-person shooter for the previous generation main consoles. That's Xbox 360 and PS3. Almost like a retrospective. He's never played it before, playing it very recently, and he's written some stuff on it. So go check that out at vgnonline.co.uk. If you don't surf the net much and you're more of a social media guy or gal, then we've got plenty of social media for you to connect with us. You can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/videogamenerdsonline, or just search for VGN Online. You can find it that way too. We're on SoundCloud. All of our podcasts and audio tidbits are on SoundCloud. That's soundcloud.com/VGN-online. Again, search it on SoundCloud, you'll find it. YouTube, search for VGN Online. You can subscribe to our page. And our Twitter handle is VGN_UK. If you want to speak to me directly, or anything related to our podcasts, or if you've got any suggestions for topics on podcasts, or you just want to talk to me, want to connect with me, I'm a nice guy. My new email address for VGN is andrew@vgnonline.co.uk. Sounds pretty official. So yeah, if you want to get in touch with us, feel free. Check out the website, vgnonline.co.uk. Throw some traffic our way, show us your love, subscribe to us on the social networks, subscribe to us on YouTube if you like what we're doing. If you don't like what we're doing, we'd love to hear why. Email me, andrew@vgnonline.co.uk. But enough self-serving advertisement. Today's VGN podcast is quite a special one. For the last few editions of the podcast, you guys have been listening to me and members of the VGN team just idly chat about what we're playing, why we're playing it, what we like to play, and that's great. But this week we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going a little bit more highbrow, a little bit more academic this week. I recently made contact with a PhD candidate at Brighton and Sussex Medical School, seeing as we're based in Brighton currently, and invited them onto the show to discuss video games and the relation to video games, or the effect video games have on one's brain. There's a lot of myths out there, a lot of information that sort of gets bandied about, regarding the effects of video games on the brain. And I'm here to I've invited our PhD candidate to clarify some of this information, and hopefully have an interesting discussion regarding it. It is with great honour that I introduce our guest today, who may become a regular fixture depending on how well she's received. We welcome into the VGN booth today Lucy Nelson, everybody. There's applause at home, just so you know. Lucy, say hello to the guys at home.
Hello everybody, thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be here at the VGN studios.
I'm glad that you think it's great to be here.
I'm excited, thanks.
Good, I'm glad you're excited. Lucy, tell us a little bit about yourself. I've explained to the guys at home very little, as you've heard. You're a PhD candidate. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I'm currently a PhD candidate at Brighton and Sussex Medical School here in Brighton in the UK. So my work currently is actually looking at different types of dementia. But I'm pretty interested in the role that gaming has on the brain. Although I'm not a gamer myself, I've always grown up around games. My older brother is an avid gamer. My boyfriend is an avid gamer. There's always video games being played in the house, always consoles surrounding me. So I was pretty excited to meet you and have a little chat about the effect video games may or might not have on the brain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really excited to hash this out today as well, because I mean, and I'm sure you'll confirm for everybody else at home, I don't really know what you're going to be talking about today. I don't know exactly what information you're going to be throwing at me. We're just going to have a nice conversation about it. But I have a feeling there may be a few myths that need to be dispelled. Yeah. You don't play many video games. Have you ever played any video games?
Yes, recently I did actually enjoy playing Fez. That was a lot of fun.
That's a really good game. I quite like Fez. It's a nice exploratory experience. It's quite ambient. There's no punishment for death and things like that. So, to quote unquote non-gamers, it's a gateway game. It's a nice gateway.
Yes, I'm perhaps a casual gamer. I do play the odd console game.
You don't need to say casual like it's a bad thing.
Casual in inverted commas, indeed, yes. Some other games I've actually really enjoyed playing are the Telltale games.
Oh, I like the Telltale games.
So very story-based games I enjoy. Also occasionally a bit of a pick-up-and-play game. Everyone's old favourite Mario Kart. I'll always give that a go.
Nice. I like Mario Kart too. Cool. So although you're not a gamer, you study. Is it neuroscience that you do?
Yes. So my PhD is in neuroscience. I did a undergrad degree in psychology at Newcastle University. Followed that straight away with a Masters of Research in Neuroscience. And then I moved down to Brighton a couple of years ago to complete my PhD in neuroscience.
Wow. I couldn't imagine spending that long doing anything. Impressive.
Thank you. It's a labour of love. Definitely a labour of love.
I can relate, as is this. Cool. Lucy, absolute pleasure to meet you. Really, really glad to have you on the show. So, let's get down to it. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the most widely pervasive comments found that you'll hear made when talking about video games and how they affect people is something that's affected me, or has not affected me, but has been relevant to me growing up playing video games. I myself have been a big fan of video game series such as Grand Theft Auto. I've always been a big fan of first-person shooters, war simulators, real-time strategy games. Intrinsically violent in nature, I would say, but I don't consider myself a violent person, and that's one of the largest comments that you may find when reading sort of newspapers or reports about video games is there's this idea that video games, or violent video games in particular, make people more violent. And I was just wondering what you would have to say about that.
Yes, that does seem to be almost a stereotype. You have this archetypical male teenage gamer getting angry at his computer games, and then maybe this will lead to an increase in aggressive behaviour in real life. But actually, incidents of violent crime, both in Europe and the United States, have decreased since the 80s. So if video games were a causal factor of aggressive behaviour, surely you'd expect violent crimes to increase.
One would expect that.
Mm-hmm. So there is scientific studies which have suggested that playing a violent video game may lead to an increase in aggressive behaviour, but recently problems have been noticed with these studies. So
what sort of problems?
So one of these problems is that aggressive behaviour is quite a difficult thing to measure, especially, ethically speaking. It's difficult to induce a violently aggressive behaviour in a normal person. You can't sort of sneakily follow someone around to see if they will be aggressive. So one of the paradigms used to investigate aggressive behaviour is known as the hot sauce paradigm.
Oh, sounds nice. Hot sauce.
Sounds tasty to you.
Totally.
Well, in this paradigm, a participant is asked to make a recipe for an imaginary person who they believe to be real, and they are told that this person doesn't like spicy food. So if the participant adds a lot of hot sauce to this recipe, that's seen as an aggressive behaviour.
So this is almost like the test to see if somebody is aggressive. You will have them concoct a fictitious meal, tell them they don't like spicy food, and if they put spicy food in it, that is classed as an act of aggression.
It's a real meal, and they are told it's for a real person.
Okay.
But yes, that addition of spicy food is seen as an aggressive act. And you may wonder, does this truly translate to a violent aggressive act, which is what people are concerned about in the real world. So that could be a problem in aggressive research, because it's very difficult to provoke someone to an aggressive act. In scientific research, we're not really allowed to do that.
No, that's completely understandable.
Yes. So there is issues in measuring aggressive behaviour. Also, when looking at video games, it's quite controversial as to what really truly is a violent video game. A lot of video games contain violence, but much of it is cartoon violence, which could be difficult to distinguish from this type of act seen in things like The Simpsons or Tom and Jerry. But these cartoons have never been demonised in the same way that video games have. So what makes video game violence different to cartoon violence?
Well, exactly. Yeah. Well, what does make it different? I mean, like you talk about the 80s and stuff. I mean, you talk about violent video games. I mean, Space Invaders is a violent video game. You're indiscriminately killing an alien race who, admittedly may want to take over the Earth. That might just be their way of saying hello. We don't have enough context for Space Invaders for this.
Yes, and video game research hasn't really taken into account why you're being violent. So perhaps there are very violent acts that you partake in video games, but if it's for the greater good, if you're trying to rescue someone from the bad guys, then is that aggressive behaviour?
Well, that's a very good question. I suppose you're just meeting aggression with more aggression, which is contradictory to what I was told for most of my life, like 2 wrongs don't make a right. But then the violence may not be wrong. It's justified in the context of the game.
Yes, so I think much of the previous research into video games hasn't taken these complexities into account.
Okay.
So they've been comparing a violent video game with a non-violent video game, but perhaps haven't truly been looking at what they think they've been looking at.
So what you're saying is we need more gamers in the academic space to give context to these sorts of studies.
I think that would definitely help. Recently, work has been done by the Oxford Internet Institute, which is part of the University of Oxford in the UK. Much of this work is headed by Dr. Andrew Shabolsky, and they realised that some of these complexities hadn't really been looked at. And they also recognised that in many of these violent versus non-violent video game tasks, the violent video game was more complicated. It was more difficult. You had a first-person shooter was being compared to Tetris, for instance.
Seems odd.
So what this study did, and this was just last year in 2014, they manipulated how difficult the game was. And they found that regardless of its violent context, it was actually the competence of the gamer which led to frustration, which then led to an aggressive behaviour. So they actually manipulated a form of Tetris where the computer game would give you exactly the shape that you did not want to complete that game of Tetris. And even though Tetris is a non-violent video game, this frustration was what led to the aggressive behaviour.
I can totally see that. If I was playing Tetris and it gave me every block that I didn't need, I'd rage quit. I'm sure I would. I feel like Tetris has done that to me before, and I feel like I have rage quit because of that in the past.
Yeah, so it's unfairness, it's frustration, that's what leads to aggressive behaviour, not the actual violent content of video games per se. So this is just very recent research that's suggesting that perhaps we haven't been looking at this in the right way. The same group of researchers did some more studies where instead of actually having people play video games, they asked children, so I think this was aged between 8 and around 14 years of age, and they asked their children how many hours a day they played computer games. And they also asked them questions about their friendships. They asked teachers about hyperactivity to get a picture of the child's behaviour.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked at how their child's behaviour and then compared that to how much time they spent playing video games.
Was there a correlation?
Well, it was found that if the child spent a short amount of time playing video games, so between about 1 to 2 hours per day, these were the children with the highest levels of adjustment. So they tended to have lower levels of hyperactivity, tended to behave better in class, and had good peer relationships.
Like really good social skills. Well, more developed social skills than other people of their age, sort of thing, like top tier social ability.
Yes, they were the best adjusted, so short amount of time playing video games, that seemed to correlate with better adjusted children.
Sweet.
However, if they were playing greater than 3 hours of video games per day, then they did less well on these scores of adjustability. But it's thought that it's not the video games per se that is damaging children. It's the fact that if you're playing video games, you're not doing other activities which are vital for developing your social skills and exercise, for instance. So you're not outside running around with other children, you're just inside by yourself, and it's that lack of social interaction which actually may be damaging.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So I guess the cliff notes from that are video games intrinsically don't necessarily make you a violent individual. As a developing individual playing video games aren't the devil.
Indeed.
It's been proven that playing video games for a short amount as a child, at regular intervals, can actually increase adjustability in developing minds. So that's quite contrarian to what I've been told for the past decade, maybe decade and a half.
Yes.
And on the back of that, I can... Thanks, Mom. She, my mother identified that I played a lot of video games as a child, with it being one of my favourite pastimes. And she actually limited the amount of video game use for me, because I may have turned into a less adjusted individual than I maybe am now. God forbid.
So yes, it really comes down to parents recognising that it's not necessarily the video games themselves, but it's how much of a chance the child has to partake in other activities. And if they're playing games with other children, so cooperative sofa games are really fun, and they allow children to learn to lose, which is important.
Yes, it is.
So this can actually help a child's development. Video games, like you say, they're not the devil.
They're not the devil. I'm glad. Many people tell you that they are. And that's awesome. So video games don't necessarily make you super violent. Do they have any other effects on the brain, maybe in more developed individuals, or are there any other effects of playing video games, be they negative or positive? Is that a thing?
Yes, so people have been looking at video games on the other side of this. So not are they bad for you, but are they good for you? And can video games be developed in a way that actually helps people with their cognition, so their thinking skills? And so people have found some correlations which aren't too surprising. So in 14-year-olds, for instance, those who play video games tend to have larger brain areas which are associated with visual processing.
Makes sense, because you're taking in a lot of visual stimulation.
Yes, definitely. Also, the type of game you play may have an impact. So at the University of London, they found that players who played a real-time strategy game, StarCraft.
Oh, StarCraft, that's one of my favourite RTS games.
Well, keep at it. Because when this was compared to The Sims, which is perhaps slower, less cognitively demanding, they found that after 40 hours of gameplay, those who played StarCraft performed better at tasks of cognitive flexibility. And cognitive flexibility is very important. It allows you to quickly move from doing one thing to another. You can switch attention between different tasks very quickly. So you can see how just in everyday life this would be a bonus.
And it also means that if you're playing as the Terran on StarCraft, you've got to be able to quickly make your base fly up in the air so that the Zerg can't attack it. And while you're doing that, you've got to also focus your attentions on your defences and the attacking party.
I will take your word for that.
It's a thing.
Yes.
It's a thing.
So a lot of gaming is mapping your thinking processes with visual information. So it's also been found that people who generally play video games, they're less susceptible for visual distraction. So that could be very important for just general car driving. So it does seem that playing computer games may have a slight cognitive benefit, as long as you're not playing them too much, where you'll be taking your time away from other activities. So it's all in moderation.
Oh, yeah, this is, as I'm growing up and becoming more of an adult, this is something that I'm finding to be a very prevalent message. Everything in moderation. Don't eat too many sweets, you'll get fat. Don't play too many video games, you'll become antisocial. Don't drink too much booze, you'll kill your liver. Everything in moderation, guys. Safe gaming. Tom Newman would reiterate, if he was here, safe gaming, guys. Everything in moderation.
Absolutely. And as we're talking about safe gaming, maybe we should chat a little bit about video gaming addiction.
Video gaming addiction. Oh, well, that's really interesting, actually, because there was a story this week. I don't know if you saw this, because I know it's not your field, but there was a guy recently, and I kid you not, man, this guy tore a tendon in his thumb.
Ouch.
Playing Candy Crush. Now, it beggars belief, because you would think that somebody who was about to tear one's tendon would possibly stop playing this game. But I was reading the news report, and it said that, the guy didn't stop playing until his tendon tore because his brain wasn't telling him that his thumb was hurting. He didn't know he was in pain until it was past the point of no return and he couldn't use his thumb. Would you say that's a consequence of gaming addiction? Was that man addicted to Candy Crush to the point where his brain was so focused on that task that he couldn't do anything else?
I think possibly. Our perception of pain is very susceptible to interference from the world around us. Pain is simply the body's way of telling us that something is wrong. So if your pleasure centers are overriding that and deciding that this video game is more important than the pain coming from your hand, that does sound a little bit like perhaps an addictive behavior.
Jeez. I mean, I play a lot of video games. I don't know if I've ever been addicted to a video game. Nope, I have. I've been addicted to a video game. There's a game on mobile platforms called Game Dev Story. And it's a game where you create a video game developer. And I remember the first time I downloaded it at 6 o'clock in the evening. And before I knew it, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was due at work at like 7 o'clock. And you laughed, dude. That was a wake up call for me. I didn't even know it was happening. I was just engrossed in this game, and it was just a tiny little screen. And I think that's the only time I could say that I've considered myself to have been addicted. Like I knew in my heart of hearts that I'd probably been playing a bit too long. And I noticed at 3 o'clock, but I didn't really go to bed till about 3:30.
Yes. Did you go to work the next day?
Yes, and I played it on my lunch break.
Yes. Well, you turned up for work, which is promising, because when something becomes addictive, the way we measure that is if it interferes negatively with everyday life.
Okay.
So it's hard to measure a video game addiction physically because it's not a substance which you put into the body. However, you can become addicted to things like gambling, social media, video gaming perhaps, if it has negative consequences upon your life. So if you're not turning up for work, if you're turning up for school late, if you're cancelling plans with friends, these may be signs that it's time to address your relationship with video gaming.
Well, I think that's a very, very fair point. Like we say, everything in moderation. I mean, video game addiction isn't something that's been sort of heavily touted in the media. I mean, you do hear snippets like that man with Candy Crush, but I mean, I know that if I've got a friend who's an alcoholic, I need to get them to AA and take them to a detox center. If I have a friend or a family member, or I know somebody who I suspect is potentially addicted to video games, what sort of avenues of therapy or what sort of avenues do I have to sort of have them negotiate? How can people seek help for video game addiction? Is that a thing?
Right. So video gaming addiction isn't technically recognised as a disorder yet, but
Okay.
It is known in the scientific community and by psychiatrists that it's something which needs to be addressed and something which more research needs to be done. So criteria are being developed, and it is, just as I mentioned before, it's mainly about the negative impacts your time playing video games has upon your life, and any preoccupation you may have with video games when you're not playing video games. So if you can't stop thinking about them, if you're fidgety, if you get itchy fingers, if you're not doing any other sort of hobbies or disciplines apart from video gaming. These are the warning signs, the wake-up calls perhaps. If you're based here in the UK, the best way to get mental health advice and treatment for free in the NHS is to first speak to your GP, because that is the person who can best refer you to the resources in your area. But before you get to that stage, you may think, well, I wouldn't class myself as an addict, but maybe I'm a little bit concerned. Maybe I'm just spending a little bit too much time on my video gaming. What can I do about that? And I think that video games are a really good way to actually learn about different art forms and different media of entertainment. Me and my boyfriend actually play the Telltale games together. They're really good story-driven games.
Oh yeah, Telltale's archetypically a narrative experience.
Yeah, we played the Wolf Among Us game, and we enjoyed that so much we actually went out and bought the original source material, which is the Fables graphic novel created by Bill Willingham. So video games can be a way to discover new media. That was really fun. I've never read a graphic novel before, and I really enjoyed it.
You never read a graphic novel before?
Nope. Hands in the air. Sorry, you got me.
No, that's good. I mean, you're an academic. It's understandable. It's understandable. You know, that's cool. No judgment here. No judgment here.
But I have now. Video games introduced me to that, so that was really good. Also, some video games are as famous for their art style or their soundtracks as their actual gameplay.
Oh, totally. Like, I listen to the Hotline Miami 1 and 2 soundtrack now, just at work, at home, just when I'm walking around down the street. I don't listen to it exclusively. I'm not addicted to it. I don't need to speak to my GP about it. But I do love those soundtracks.
Yeah. So video games can be a way for you to find other media, other disciplines. So perhaps if you really, really love the Dark Souls games, Demon Souls, yes, whatever they are.
Demon Souls was the original.
Yes.
And then Dark Souls was like a sequel, and that had 2 installments. And now there's Bloodborne.
That's what I was trying to think of.
Oh, you're trying to think of Bloodborne.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Quite iconic art styles. There's nothing stopping a lover of those thinking, I'm going to spend an hour trying to sketch some art of my own. And then it allows you to spend your time doing something else, something creative.
No, totally. I dig it. It's like you say, man. Everything in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in moderation. A little bit of video games here. That might inspire you to go and do something else. No, it's nice. Gateways. So that's 2 wins for video games so far. Video games don't make you angry, don't make you aggressive, and they may possibly, I say possibly, there's scientific proof that they can help with development in the brain. Awesome. I just want to bring your attention to something else that I've been looking at recently. Pro gaming is a thing now. Esports is a big thing.
Yes.
And I was doing a bit of research on the esports scene, possibly for a podcast, possibly for a talking point or an article. And I did a bit of research, and I found that there's, and I kid you not, there's a headset that's been marketed at video game players. And this headset, it looks weird, man. It's like, it's not a VR headset or anything like that, because we're talking about gaming. It's nothing to do with VR. So what you do is you put this helmet on, and there's electrodes on there, and you put those electrodes onto certain parts of your skull. And what it does is it'll put a really low voltage electrical current through your head on those parts of the brain, and allegedly stimulate the correct parts of the brain that will make you better at video games. So I guess what these companies are trying to do I suppose it's not necessarily yes, they are performance enhancing headsets that allegedly make you better at video games. Do you have any experience with this at all? Can you confirm or deny this to be the case?
Yes, I think what you're talking about are transcranial direct current stimulation headsets, sometimes abbreviated as TDCS.
TDCS? What's the full thing again?
Transcranial direct current stimulation.
Transcranial direct current stimulation headsets. Yes. Not crazy headset helmet things with electrodes in them.
Well, they mean the same thing.
They do mean the same thing. Your version rolls off the tongue just a little bit better, though.
Yes, I have came across these a little bit. I've seen that you can get DIY kits, and there are small companies selling them to gamers. And the way they work is that they simply do send electronic currents, usually in millivolts, into areas of the brain, and this is to it actually decreases the amount of electricity that your brain cells naturally need to work. So that's how they work. They lower that threshold that your neurons, your brain cells naturally need to fire to work.
Okay. So, in theory, if I understand this correctly, I put the electrodes on my head, and those parts of my brain don't need as much energy to do what they normally do. So, an alleged effect of that is that my brain can effectively work faster in certain situations.
Yeah, maybe faster, maybe a bit more. Yep, that's right. And these sets are used in scientific research. People, they're used in Parkinson's disease, for instance. And people are investigating their role in memory function and in thinking. However, in scientific research, these are done by people who know a lot about the electrical currents within your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in a very extremely controlled conditions, because where you plop these electrodes on your head makes a big difference. So if you orient them incorrectly, or if you use the wrong type of current, because you have direct and alternating current, this definitely makes a difference as well. So unless you know exactly what you're doing, you may induce unwanted effects.
Dangerous effects?
Possibly. All that's been reported so far, officially, are actual burns to the skin on the head.
What?
Yes, people have burnt themselves trying to stimulate their brain. It sounds quite science fiction to me. It's not something I'm going to be trying in my own home anytime soon. And I was actually happened to be at the British Neuroscience Association conference. They have their biannual conference in Edinburgh this year. So I had a chat with some guys from Rogue Resolutions. And this is a company who makes these devices for medical and scientific purposes. Mm-hmm. And I said, so are you aware that there are some game sets being sold, headsets being sold for gamers? And he was aware of this technology available to the public and being made by unregulated companies. And he said, can't do anything to stop it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, because this is a completely unregulated device. It's an unregulated industry, because it's sold to healthy people, and it's sold as a non-medical device. So as long as you aren't selling anything that has too high a current, you can sell whatever you like.
So it's completely unregulated?
At the moment, yes, as it is classed as a performance-enhancing, non-medical device. And it's also classed as non-invasive, which I think is quite controversial.
Well, you've just told me they burn you. Like, that's pretty invasive.
Yes, but yeah, just because you're not putting anything through the skin, it's classed as non-invasive. But you are attempting to manipulate electrical currents in your brain.
Do you know of any companies that do this? Do you know the names of any companies? Anybody I could possibly get in touch with? This is interesting.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest companies who have offices both in America and the UK, and in Europe as well, I believe, are Focus. And they create headsets specifically for gamers. So is this something you're interested in? Something you're tempted in?
Well, I'd be a liar if I said that I've never dreamed of playing video games professionally. And then I'd also be a liar if I said that this didn't intrigue me in improving my video game ability. But I'd also be lying if I said that it doesn't worry me, some of these side effects. But you say they're based in London?
Yes, Focus. That's foc.us. They do have an office in London. And like I said, although there have been reports of burning and sort of tingling at the scalp, this hasn't stopped dozens, if not hundreds, of people giving this a go. So perhaps in the future this will just be a normal thing that you see in teenagers' bedrooms. Who knows?
This doesn't sound normal. But then, progress makes fools of us all. Cool. So, Focus, I think if you're listening to this, guys at Focus, check your email inbox, because Andrew of the VGN has probably already sent you an email asking to test this out and report back to the general VGN audience base. This sounds intriguing, if not a little bit weird/dangerous.
It does sound quite exciting and dangerous, and as a scientist, I'm fully on board with both of those.
I like that. I like your candor. Cool. So, quick little roundup. Is there a link between video games and aggression? The Cliff Notes.
The video games which can lead to aggressive behaviours are video games which are unfair. And if you feel like you can't, if you feel incompetent playing a video game, then you get frustrated, which can lead to aggressive behaviour. Sounds pretty common sense to me.
That's fair enough. Do video games have an effect on the brain? From what I understand from what you were saying before, yes, they do have an effect on the brain. Too much of a good thing is too much of a good thing. If you limit your video game use and you regulate it and you don't overdo it, then there are strong chances that you can become a more well-adjusted individual because your visual center gets beefed up and you become less distracted because you're good at focusing at things.
Yes, video games can enhance those sorts of skills, attention skills, visual attention skills, but in general, video games aren't going to have a huge impact, so they're nothing to be too concerned about as long as you or your child is also engaging in other activities.
That's awesome. And we've also discussed the addictive nature of video games, or the reports of addiction in video games. And if you wouldn't mind just repeating for the audience at home, what the best way to seek help for video game addiction is.
Yes, so if you're at all concerned that you may be spending a little bit too much time on video games, if they're online or if you're just playing by yourself, just have a quick word with your GP because he or she will know the best available resources for you in your area.
That's fantastic. So, 2 good things for video games. Addiction's obviously an issue, and we need to do a little bit more research on those headsets.
Yes.
I, Andrew Stevenson of VGNonline.co.uk, solemnly swear to get in touch with Focus and attempt to review or report on these headsets. I will be putting my health potentially at risk to do this for you guys. Look forward to it in the future. Or look forward to me telling you that Focus don't want me reporting on it. That's great, Lucy. These podcasts aren't typically much longer than half an hour, 45 minutes. I think we've been talking about some really solid stuff today. If anybody wanted to get in touch with you, you're not an official member of VGN yet, although you look like you've had a lot of fun today.
I've had a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
That's fine. I'm happy to have you again on the show if there's anything you ever want to come talk about. Are we okay to contact you in the future if there's anything we feel like we need academic support on?
Definitely. You can always catch me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Lucy_neurosci.
Lucy_neurosci.
Right.
Spell neurosci for the guys at home because I don't know how to spell it.
So that's Lucy_neurosci. Neurosci.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you very much for your time today. I'll be saying Dr. Nelson soon enough, I would assume, but for right now, it's just Lucy, I'm assuming.
Yes, I have my final exams later on this year, so perhaps I will be meeting you again as Dr. Nelson in the future.
Wow, it would be nice to have a doctor on staff. I think that would give us a lot of credibility. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for your time today, Lucy. Guys at home, just to let you guys know, the VGN website, vgnonline.co.uk, is now live. The store should be open imminently. If you're listening to this a couple of days after the podcast was released, it's probably up already. A couple of t-shirt designs from Grant Killoran up there. We accept PayPal payments and we ship everything to your door. Any questions, you can email me, Andrew at vgnonline.co.uk, whether that's for anything related to the website, anything related to the podcast, if you want to hear anything or you want us to report on anything, feel free to get in touch. We value community feedback. You know, this has been an evolutionary process from the beginning. This is the first time that myself and a lot of the VGN team have ever done any sort of media reporting or coverage of the video game industry in any sort of official capacity. So all feedback is most welcome. Feedback can be given by email, like I say, to andrew at vgnonline.co.uk. These podcasts can be picked up on SoundCloud and iTunes. We now have an iTunes we're now up in iTunes. You can search for us on Facebook, VGN Online, or facebook.com/Video Game Nerds Online. Twitter handles VGN_UK, and all of our video content ends up on YouTube as well. It's been an absolute pleasure, like I say, Lucy, talking to you today. I do hope to have you on the show in the future. Thank you so much, guys, for listening at home, and please don't hesitate to get in touch with us and let us know what you want to hear from us. If not, then I'll just keep doing the podcasts as I see fit. Thank you so much for your time, everybody, and safe gaming. Take care, guys.
Safe gaming. Bye, guys.
No. Hit no. Hit no. And then click it. And then stop recording.